My name is Marissa. I've always been the quiet one in the family, the one who didn't complain, who helped clean up after parties, who watched the kids so others could enjoy themselves. I didn't mind at first. I thought that was love, showing up. But as I grew older, I realized I was the only one showing up. My sister Camilla, the golden child with the perfect hair and the loud laugh that could fill a room, was the sun in my parents' universe. They praised her for the smallest things, like remembering to send a thank you text. Meanwhile, I was working late hours, paying part of their mortgage without being asked, and babysitting Camilla's kids every weekend. My reward? Silence. I'll never forget the day it all shifted. I had just returned from a business trip. My startup was finally gaining traction, but I hadn't shared much about it with my family. Why would I? They never asked. I came straight to our parents' house, exhausted, only to find a note on the fridge. Camilla dropped the kids off. Back by 10. No hello, no how was your trip? That night, while feeding her youngest dinner and folding laundry, I overheard my mom on the phone. She laughed softly and said, "Well, Marissa's basically their nanny now. It's not like she has anything else going on." I froze. I felt every word like a stone against my spine. Just a nanny? After everything? When Camilla came to pick the kids up, she barely looked up from her phone. "Thanks," she said, tossing a pack of juice boxes into her purse like it was a war mission. I stood at the door and watched them leave, thinking about how small they made me feel in a life I had built around keeping theirs intact. A week later, at a family dinner, the humiliation became public. My dad raised a toast to Camilla, celebrating her new Instagram partnership with a skincare brand. He beamed with pride, saying, "Camilla's really making it big. And Marissa, thank you for being the best babysitter anyone could ask for." The whole table laughed. I smiled, tight-lipped. But inside, something broke, and something else woke up. They didn't know the life I had built while they dismissed me. They didn't know that the company I'd been quietly building was finally profitable, that I had investors, that I had power now, real power. But I stayed quiet. I wasn't going to raise my voice. I was going to raise the stakes. And the moment came faster than I expected. One rainy Thursday, I walked into my office for a series of interviews for a new executive assistant. The first name on the list made me stop breathing for a second. Daniel Callahan, Camilla's husband. The resume was professional. He had no idea it was my company. No idea I would be sitting across from him in that glass conference room. And the best part? He was unemployed. Camilla had posted a sad-faced selfie the week before, complaining about how no one wants to hire someone over 35 with no tech experience. I smiled and said, "Send him in." That day, I didn't just welcome a job applicant. I welcomed the beginning of the most poetic revenge I would ever take. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. The same family who said I was just the nanny was about to watch me become something far more powerful than they ever imagined. When Daniel walked into the room, he didn't recognize me at first. My hair was sleek, my blazer sharp, and I wasn't holding a diaper bag or a stack of coloring books. I was sitting at the head of a long glass table in a corner office overlooking the city. "Miss Halpern," he said, offering his resume. I smiled. "You can call me Marissa." His jaw twitched, just slightly. He knew, but he couldn't walk out, not when he needed the job, not when Camilla's influencer gig wasn't paying what it used to, and his consulting work had dried up. So he sat down, swallowed his pride, and let me interview him. I kept it professional, even as I asked him to explain gaps in his resume and times he failed at leadership. He squirmed, but I wasn't cruel. Not yet. I hired him the next morning, and every day that followed, he showed up to my office. He called me ma'am. He fetched my coffee, organized my calendar, sat silently through executive meetings where I spoke confidently about expansion and equity. He watched me get congratulated for closing deals worth more than his entire yearly income. Camilla, meanwhile, had no idea. She kept posting family brunches and throwback pictures of us as kids, where she was always centered in the frame and I was blurred in the background. "Love my forever best friend," she captioned one. I stared at the screen and almost laughed. It wasn't love. It was performance, and I was done playing supporting character in her pageant. One afternoon, during a quarterly board meeting, Daniel and I were asked to present together. He fumbled through his slides. I stepped in. I was calm, articulate, collected, and after the presentation, the chairman clapped me on the back and said, "You're building something real here, Marissa." Daniel stood silently beside me, invisible, just like I had been at their dinner table for years. Later that week, I finally answered my mother's calls. She wanted me to come over. Camilla was throwing a party for her twins' birthdays, and they needed someone to help set up early. She even said the words, "You're so good with kids." I smiled into the phone. "I'll be there," I replied. And I was, but not with streamers and cupcakes. I arrived in a sleek black car, wearing a tailored pantsuit, and Daniel trailing a few feet behind me, carrying 2 contracts, one for a joint project between my company and the event's sponsor, and one severing all remaining financial ties I had to my parents' household. No more mortgage support, no more weekend childcare, no more guilt money. As I walked through the door, I handed the contracts to my mother and said, "From now on, let's keep everything professional. You once said I was just the nanny. I figured you'd appreciate some structure." Camilla turned pale. Daniel didn't say a word. He simply placed the papers on the dining room table and stood behind me. My mother tried to argue, said it was just a joke, that I was being dramatic. But I wasn't angry. I was precise. And before I left, I took one final photo, a selfie in their living room. I captioned it, "Not the nanny, the CEO." The post went viral within hours. What they didn't understand was that revenge didn't need to be loud. It just had to be undeniable. A few months passed and everything remained silent from their side. No angry texts, no backhanded comments. Just silence. And in that silence, something remarkable happened. I healed. Not all at once, but slowly, in moments. In late-night walks after a long day at work. In reading a book with my feet tucked under me and no one asking me to pause and grab juice boxes. In deep, uninterrupted laughter with friends who never asked me to be less so else could shine. Daniel now showed up every morning precisely at 8:30, no longer late. He was efficient, obedient, careful. He didn't talk about Camilla, and I didn't ask. I had no interest in his marriage. I wasn't out to destroy it. I was out to reclaim mine with myself. One morning, while reviewing files in the office, I noticed Daniel standing at the window, staring out, not working. When I asked if everything was all right, he turned to me, hesitated, then admitted, "Camilla filed for separation." I nodded, said nothing. That wasn't my battle. That was the world correcting its own imbalance. But something else changed. That same week, I got an invitation, addressed formally, to my parents' vow renewal ceremony. A golden envelope, handwritten calligraphy, RSVP required. The sheer audacity almost made me laugh. After everything, after calling me just the nanny, after making me cook and babysit and miss years of my own joy for Camilla's convenience, after kicking me out for not liking a post, now they wanted me to smile in family photos? I dropped the invitation in the shredder without a second glance. But I wasn't done. Instead of attending their event, I scheduled a company-wide leadership retreat that same weekend, hosted at the very estate my parents had chosen for their renewal. They didn't know it yet, but I'd quietly purchased the property weeks earlier. The previous owners, some distant friends of my board chair, had been happy to sell. The day of their renewal, their guests arrived, dressed in pastels and carrying floral arrangements, only to be met by our event staff at the gates. "Sorry, this venue has been booked exclusively for Halpern and Company for the entire weekend." My parents stood frozen outside the gates, clutching their invitation and looking at the banner fluttering in the wind. Halpern and Company Executive Summit, building what they said we couldn't. They didn't even make it inside. I watched from a glass balcony as they argued with staff, as their guests slowly turned and walked away. Camilla was crying. My mother looked confused, then devastated. My father just stared. No words left. Daniel stood beside me again, now dressed in company black, holding a tablet. Should I have security escort them off the premises? I shook my head. Number, let them watch. Because this was never about vengeance with fire. It was about clarity, about letting them feel the weight of their choices, not with shouts, but with silence, not with chaos, but with undeniable truth. That night, when the lights of the estate glowed golden and our team laughed around the fire pit in the courtyard where my family had once planned to toast themselves, I stepped away. I wandered to the far side of the garden, phone in hand. I opened the last message I'd gotten from my mother, still unread. It was weeks old. "You really hurt us. We never meant to make you feel unimportant." I closed it without replying. Instead, I opened the camera, took a photo of the estate lit up behind me, captioned it simply, "Sometimes silence is the loudest thing you'll ever hear." I didn't need them to apologize. I didn't need them to understand. I had turned their dismissal into power, their insult into purpose, and their rejection into my redemption. The nanny? Number, I was the empire now, and I had just closed the gates